Good evening, everyone, or evening to those over in New Zealand. Good morning to those who are probably tuning in from parts of Africa and elsewhere across the world. Thanks for coming along to our Teaching Regional and Rural New South Wales webinar, either this evening or this morning, depending on where you're beaming in from. We might just give it one more minute for people to start joining in, and then we'll kick off with the webinar. So we'll just give it about 60 more seconds, let a few more people join in, and then we can get started. Just before we do start, a bit of housekeeping for those that are here. If you've got any specific questions, you're very welcome to use the chat function within Microsoft Teams. So feel free to shoot through any questions you've got throughout the whole process, and either one of myself or Char or Claire will look to address the questions through the webinar. If you've got any visa specific questions, we're not visa experts. We ask that you address those to a registered migration agent so they can actually give you some specific advice. We can give you some headline information around visas, and we will do that through the webinar. But any visa specific questions that you've got specific to your own circumstances, we'd ask that you direct those to a registered migration agent. So aside from those, feel free to throw any questions in the chat box, and we'll get started in about 30 seconds. We're at 5:32 p.m. in New South Wales, which I think is about 7:32 in New Zealand, Claire, and about 4:32 in Queensland, Char, isn't it? So we got 3 different time zones between the 3 presenters here, which is great. And I'm sure a lot of other people beaming in are coming in from their own different time zones as well. So we'll get started. Just a bit of an introduction. My name's Mitch, and I'm one of the regional managers at ANZUK UK. I've been working with the company for about 7 years now, and work to support teachers, not just from overseas, but locally as well, but predominantly from overseas, make Australia their new home and start their teaching and new journey living in Australia. Going from left to right, I might throw to you, Claire, for a bit of an introduction from your side as well.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Claire. I'm coming to you from Auckland in New Zealand. My role is to support New Zealand-based educators making the move to Australia, and we also support the UK. And yeah, if you're in other geographies that work well with the time zone, then I'll be the one supporting you too. So we're part of the global team. We're spread out across the world. I used to be a primary teacher, and but yeah, I've been supporting traveling educators for many years now, and yeah, love my job. So looking forward to tonight.
Char. And Char, where are you coming in from, Char?
Thanks. So I'm coming in from Queensland at the minute. So I'm in regional Queensland now. But my name's Charlene. Everyone calls me Char. I'm obviously not originally from Australia. I'm originally from Ireland. I grew up in London, and then I moved to Australia probably about 12 years ago. So I've been working with ANZUK UK for just over 2 years, and I support teachers locally, same as Mitch. We work very closely together, that are either locally or moving internationally to teach in regional and rural New South Wales, and also some remote locations as well. In the 10 years of me first moving to Australia, I actually worked in schools, so a large school in Sydney, and then I moved myself to regional New South Wales with my family, and I worked in a school there for a number of years as well. Thanks.
Fantastic. So that's an introduction for the 3 of us. There's a lot more to ANZUK UK than just Mitch, Char and Claire. We've been around for a bit over 20 years now. So we originally started supporting local teachers from Australia and the UK to move, Australia and New Zealand, to move over to the UK to start their teaching journey internationally, hence the name ANZUK UK was born. Pretty quickly that grew to supporting local needs in Australia as well. So we still continue to work with schools in the UK and supporting them with Australian and New Zealand teachers making the move. But by far the biggest area that we're exposed to now is supporting local Australian schools. So we've got over 300 staff globally. I dare say that number's probably increased to over 400 now, with a lot more presence across the US. But working with our offices in Australia, in North America, obviously with Claire in New Zealand, through the UK and Europe as well, we're able to really support a global pipeline of educators looking to make Australia their home. So over the past 2 decades, we've got very strong relationships with not just educators in different countries, but with schools across Australia who value the input that we've got and understand the alignment that a lot of these international educators can provide. I might throw over to you, Claire, to talk a bit more about making the transition from overseas to Australia.
Yeah. Okay, so to be able to work in Australia, you do need the right to work. If you've got a New Zealand passport, that's a really easy avenue for you. So we are immediate permanent residents as soon as we enter the country. So you can enter on a one-way ticket. There's nothing to do pre-departure. We can walk into the country and we have all the same rights as an Australian citizen. We just can't vote or access the benefits. So it's a really easy transition for us. If you have another passport, then there are lots of avenues that you can explore for visas. The working holiday visa is accessible to a lot of different geographies, and then there's also the skilled worker pathways. 189 and 190 are very common visas that people will access. They are a lot of work, but they do give you the right to settle, and they're a pathway for you to permanently reside in Australia. It is important at this stage to say that we aren't visa experts, and so for any visa information, as Mitch said earlier, we would direct you to an immigration agent to make sure that you're getting the right information and support that you need. We have got a little bit of information. We'll do a follow-up from this session anyway, so we'll put some links on there for you. Sponsorship it can be a pathway, but it's very, very difficult to try and secure a sponsorship role. They're quite rare. You need to be a really experienced secondary teacher in sort of the STEM subject areas. Jump in, Mitch and Char. This is more your area than me, but it's
the sponsorship.
Yeah, not easy.
Yeah, so it is competitive, and there's only so many schools that would have the license to sponsor teachers. That's something that they have to go to. So there's a little bit more that goes into it. But yeah, the most common pathway for sponsorship, if a school does have the license to do it, would be a 482 sponsorship. But we can work with you if that's your only way. But if you can get a visa, that's going to be a lot easier for you to be able to, I guess, as well, have the ability to go to a high number of schools, for us to put you across to a high number of schools that could be suitable, whereas there'd only be a small number of schools to be able to go for sponsorship in.
Yeah, so a lot more opportunities if you can explore those visas. So we recommend, if you're in South Africa, tuning in from there, we recommend Marlene. She's with the Migration Network Australia, and this is what she does. She's really experienced in this area. Yeah, reach out to her and you can have a conversation and do a bit of exploring around that. Part of that, wrapped up with the visa, is the requirements that your qualifications do need to be recognised in Australia, which means they need to be a 4-year degree, and you also need to pass an IELTS test if you trained in a non-English speaking country. So that's sort of the results you need to get there. What else we got? So Australia has each state has their own teacher registration body, so they all have their own pathways. Because tonight we're just talking about New South Wales, we will go into a little bit further in a minute, the process. But if you are registered in New Zealand, then we have something called the Trans-Tasman Mutual Recognition Agreement, which means that you will be recognised at the same status as you are in New Zealand. So if you're fully registered here, you will come out as proficient in New South Wales. For other geographies, to meet the registration requirements, as mentioned, you need the 4-year degree to be able to be registered as a teacher, and they do look at the number of days you've had in practicum and things like that. So normally those sorts of things will be covered off in your transcript, but yeah, you just need to make sure that you meet those requirements.
Okay, so going on to locations in New South Wales that Mitch and I work with. When we talk about regional, we're really talking about anything outside of the city area, so anything outside of the major CBDs. And there's obviously different sizes. It's a pretty large state. You can be traveling for a fair time to reach the border of Queensland. So for example, when we talk about regional cities, these can be quite large, and they're very popular places to live. So really they're going to have populations of over 40,000 people. A lot of our regional cities, and Mitch and I have both lived in regional cities in New South Wales. These cities have all the amenities, everything that you'd need. Sorry, including regional airports that make it really nice and easy for you to fly into Sydney or Brisbane or Melbourne very easily. So even though they're country areas, they have got absolutely everything that you need, and it is very similar to living in a city, just with basically a better commute and a bit of a quieter pace. Then we've got our smaller country towns, so anything outside of those large regional hubs. And those towns will have populations of between 10 and 40,000, so a bit smaller than the large regional hubs, but normally only within a couple of hours radius of those really large hubs as well. And then we have the small country towns, and then even our remote communities. So there'll be populations of under 5,000. Some of the communities I work with would be really small. They might have about 800 people in them, and some very, very small schools. And you may be traveling 5, 6, 7 hours to get to your nearest city. But most of them are within a reasonable commute to the large major hubs, where you'll be able to fly out of most of them anyway. We also have an office in Tamworth, which is one of the major regional cities in New South Wales. And we do a lot of community events. So we have actually placed a large number of teachers in these areas. So where we do particularly have a large group, it's really nice to get everyone together because everyone's in this journey together. So it's nice for you to be able to meet people that like-minded, have left where they're living, left their countries, and you can gather and all have barbecues, or we'll arrange picnics or evenings out where we can get everybody together so you can meet people that are doing something very similar to you. Also, we do have some locations that will provide accommodation. We'll go into that a little bit later in the slides, but moving to one of the big parts about moving to the country is that it can just be a little bit of an easier transition for you when you make the move to New South Wales and go into the major cities, especially for those schools that do provide accommodation or incentives for you. It can just make that move a lot smoother. And then registering in New South Wales. So Claire did mention this. So we have NESA, that's the registration body in New South Wales, and in Australia every state has a separate one. So as Mitch said at the beginning of this, we're concentrating on New South Wales at the moment for this webinar, but we do have consultants across Australia. So if something happened where you maybe even initially moved to New South Wales, but later decided to make the move to Queensland, or later decided to go to Western Australia, we can help anywhere. And we have consultants that know all the details about registering in each state. So we'll be able to help you with that. But for New South Wales, it is NESA. And look, one of the main points with NESA, other than, unlike other states, is you can only register on arrival. And that's majorly because of the Working with Children check. So you must apply for a Working with Children check in person at a Service New South Wales centre. It doesn't take very long to come through. I think we've put 1 to 5 days there, and around $80. But typically we can see them come through in 24 hours. And then once you have your Working with Children check, you can then upload that to your NESA account with all of the other requirements of documentation, which we can talk you through at the time as well that you will need. And then if you're coming from New Zealand, it's a pretty quick process because you've got that mutual recognition. So we see a lot of mutual recognitions come through with NESA within about a week. But if you're going through the full process and you're not from New Zealand with mutual recognition, then it can take about 30 days roughly. And it's about it's $100 a year to keep your registration with NESA and to be able to teach in a school. Now, you are not able to teach in a school until you have NESA. You can still interview though, and secure a job without NESA. Our schools do it every day. We've placed a lot of international teachers already for a January 2026 start, and majority of them wouldn't have had NESA, and they've done online interviews overseas. So it's something our schools are well used to, and it's not a problem at all. And that's that for that slide. Sorry, just seeing that I touched on that other point before. I'll just throw over to you now, Mitch.
Thanks, Char. Yeah, I might speak about some of the work options that we've got available. So we predominantly in our space that Char and I work in, it's mostly contract or permanent roles, which I know a lot of international teachers are looking for a bit of security in making the move over. And that's an employment contract directly with the school. So we're not the employer. We just help facilitate the introduction. So it allows you to get a lot of support within your own faculty, within your own team, within your own department, and learn a lot more about the new Australian curriculum and maybe some of the differences in how we do things compared to back home. It gives you that consistent approach in the same classes and the same schools every day, which often leads to far better classroom management strategies because the kids get to know you, and probably more importantly, you get to know the kids as well. You get to have that consistency of knowing where you're going every day, so less differences in casual teaching opportunities or what we call CRT or relief, where in theory you might be in 5 different schools in 5 days. Now, that's something that our metropolitan teams can offer, but in the regional areas, it's predominantly or basically exclusively really contract and permanent roles, which also allows you really good opportunities for career development. So if you're coming from significant amount of teaching experience back home, or even from a leadership role, and you'd like to remain or move into leadership pretty quickly, teaching in regional and rural areas gives you a much faster runway towards leadership because the roles tend to be less competitive because there's less people going for them. So it allows you to fast track your career development. And like Char mentioned, we can organise digital interviews whilst you're still at home. You can organise these interviews, you can get these jobs secured even without your local teacher registration in place. So don't worry too much about NESA. We can organise digital interviews and get you provisional job offers even without that in place. How we support you as well, probably the most important thing is we're a free service. So there's a few misconceptions about working with an agency, and one is, well, they've got to make money somehow. They must charge a teacher, or if they place you in a permanent job, they'll take a bit of a commission out of your pay, and you lose money because you've gone through an agency. We're completely free for teachers. How we operate and how we make our money is by supporting the schools. So essentially we're a service to the schools where they'll reach out to us and engage with us and say, we're looking for a maths teacher, we're looking for a primary teacher, a science teacher, do you know of anyone? And because we're doing these webinars now and doing our research and getting to know you and understand what your plans are, if you line up with a school that we've got a relationship with, we can introduce you and then get a job opportunity out of that. So financially, that's how we work. It's a service to the schools. So if you really wanted to boil it down, the schools pay us for supporting them with teachers. So the flip side of that is it's completely free for you. So for those of you that are overseas at the moment, maybe not so New Zealand, but other international countries who are looking at visa pathways and skilled migrant options, you'll realise that migration agents cost money. We don't cost anything at all. So we're a completely free service. And we get to know you as well. So if you're going to regional New South Wales, you'll be dealing with either Char or myself. If you're coming via New Zealand, you'll definitely be dealing with Claire first. And what we always do is sit down and we'll have a digital meeting with you. So where we can, we'll sit down face to face on a digital meeting over a webcam, get to know not just about your teaching background, but about you. You know, what's motivating you to go and live in Australia? What are your preferences? What do you like to do on the weekends? Because what that allows us to do is really refine our search processes. So we're finding schools and communities that we know are going to be a good fit for you. So it's not just a case of you're an English teacher and here's an English position and we'll push you together and try to make it happen. We'll happily overlook a number of teaching roles that we know won't be a fit for you, perhaps your family, because of the location or the community or the whatever it might be. So we really do take the time to get to know you so we can align you with those jobs that match up the best. And with those jobs in mind, we help with CV preparation, interview preparation. So there are services out there that cost a fee, and what they do is they'll say, well, look, we'll make your CV up in an Australian format, in an Australian context, and they'll charge for that. We do that free of charge. So you don't need to go and outsource any support or any help. We do the CV and interview preparation in-house ourselves, which again helps us match you to the right school. We'll then submit you to those schools directly. So we get to bypass that HR firewall. So you don't necessarily need to wait for closing dates. You don't need to address specific selection criteria. We get to pick up the phone and say to the people we've got a relationship with, we get to speak to the principals and the deputy principals and say, hey, Stephen, I've just sent you across a fantastic English teacher. We reckon she's going to be a great fit for your school because of A, B, and C, and X, Y, and Z. He'll say, great, we trust you. Let's get them in for an interview. So we get to work on behalf of you to get these interviews at schools. And again, it's not just a face-to-face interview, it's organising these digital interviews as well. The teaching salaries in New South Wales, this is the great thing, one of the highest paying, if not the highest paying state in Australia. The rates of pay are outstanding. So if you're a graduate teacher, that figure's actually been bumped up for next year. It's around 90,000 Australian at the moment. And Claire, I might get you to do the calculations for what that is in New Zealand dollars, but I'll see if I can do it now quickly as we're talking. But I reckon it's 105,000 New Zealand dollars as a first year out of university graduate teacher. So you can see for those Kiwis that are on the webinar, what an outstanding rate of pay that is. For those that are beaming in from South Africa, I'd say 90,000 Australians, probably equivalent to about R1 million. Let's have a look. You bang out just over R1 million. So that's what you'd be getting as a first year graduate teacher. For those who have experience, that increases incrementally up to about 7 years full-time experience, where it caps out at about 127,000 Australian dollars. So you can see that there's a significant amount of growth there in your salary. You don't need to negotiate your salary. I know in some overseas countries, the school will say, well, we think you're worth X, and they'll offer you X, and then you go back and forth and negotiate until you get a figure that you're happy with. Here, it's very black and white, where the school says you're a graduate or you're a fifth year or you're a seventh year, this is what you will be paid, and it's all there in writing in black and white for you. So the teaching salaries in New South Wales are definitely outstanding. I think this might be the last slide from me before I'll pass back over to Char, but some of the incentives are pretty significant as well. So I think Char did touch on it earlier. Some schools can offer furnished accommodation. Generally, the more regional, the more remote the schools are, the more bells and whistles they attach. But things like furnished accommodation, either on the school campus or within the town itself. Some schools, or a lot of schools actually, will offer rental subsidies. So you find your own accommodation, it might cost you $300 a week, but they might say, well, look, we'll contribute $80 a week to that to help subsidise the cost. They'll offer other financial incentives. That might include covering your relocation costs. So there's a couple of school networks that we work with if you're moving from overseas and get a permanent job, they'll cover up to $5,000 Australian for your relocation expenses, which, if done properly, can include your flights as well. There can be some significant bonus and incentive payments in some schools, up to 50,000 Australian dollars as well. So nearly, or a bit over 50% of 1 year's salary, in some cases, can be your financial incentive for taking a role on. So there's some pretty good figures and incentives out there. And again, Char touched on it before, and so did Claire. Visa sponsorship, look, it can be an option, but where possible, we suggest teachers look to explore skilled visas as their preferred pathway, just to take the risk and the time out of it. And a lot of other schools offer either reduced teaching loads or significant mentorship for early career and beginning teachers too. So if you're a first year teacher in New Zealand, or over in South Africa or Kenya, wherever you might be, and you're worried about the workload, it's a busy job being a teacher. There's no getting no two buts about it. But the good thing is a lot of these schools offer significant levels of support for early career teachers, regardless of if you've been trained in Australia, New Zealand, or another overseas country. Might pass to you, Char, for a couple more from here.
Thanks. And I was just about to type and respond to Mercy's question, but actually it is about pay and incentives, which is the topic anyway. So I thought I would just do it while I'm speaking. So yes, if you've got 7 or more years of teaching experience in a school, a full-time experience, and you can prove that with statements of service from your school. So again, we will do a lot more of this when we speak with you one-on-one and when we send you across to a school, but we can let you know the exact selection criteria that school or that diocese needs to confirm that you have got and you are eligible at 7 years plus full-time teaching experience. And then majority of the schools that Mitch and I work with are independent and Catholic schools, and majority of them will pay to your level of teaching experience. So teachers will come internationally with provisional accreditation with NESA. And that basically means you haven't yet ticked off the Australian standards because you haven't worked and taught here. If you're from New Zealand and, like Claire said earlier, you're fully registered, then you will be fully proficient in New South Wales. So you'll already be completely proficient. And if you're 7 or more experience, you'll be right at the top of the pay scale. If you're international, doesn't matter how many years of experience you have, you will be provisionally accredited. And you will have typically about 12 months to go with your school with support in place to tick off those Australian standards and to move to proficiency. However, all of the schools that I work with, they do pay with statements of service of proof to the pay scale based on your experience internationally, because they recognise that you're only provisional because you haven't taught yet in Australia and not for the lack of experience. So yes, in most cases, some they may still pay towards status. If you're provisionally accredited with NESA, they may say that they'll pay you as a provisionally accredited teacher, but it is pretty rare these days, especially in our regional and rural schools. So yes, typically you will be paid on your experience. So back to the cost of living. And this is another big thing in terms of incentives. We talk about what you get out of, I guess, incentives in terms of financial or accommodation. When my husband and I were both working in Sydney in permanent positions in schools, we chose to move to regional New South Wales, and it was such a large regional centre. We didn't get any incentives to move there because it's already quite a competitive area to get teach and work in. And it's a beautiful place to live and raise a family. But for us, it was the cost of living. So myself and my husband were living outside of Sydney in the Blue Mountains, and we were commuting an hour and a half a day on the M4 in traffic to work. And obviously cost of living, your rent, everything's going to be much higher. So when we moved to a regional into a regional area, for what you can pay, so just to give you a bit of an idea of price, a room in a share house in Bondi would cost you between $500 and $600 a week, and that's just for a room. And then if you move to a large regional city, like me and my husband did, For 400 to 500, we could get a whole house, a big 3-4 bedroom house for us and our family for that price. And then again, if you move to a rural area, a small rural town, you could be paying a couple of $100s. So even without any incentives from a school, your cost of living is so much lower because your rent's going to be so much lower. Anything that you, even spending, there's probably just not as much of quick spending, you know, takeaways and things like that you find in the city. You're just always putting your hand in your pocket and always spending. So cost of living generally is a lot better in the regional areas. You just pop over to the next slide. Sorry, Mitch. Thanks.
Such a win, isn't it? Because you're still earning the same amount as a teacher living in the city. Yeah.
That's right. So teacher pay doesn't
Huge
change in New
difference.
South Wales depending on where you're
Yeah.
living. So if you're getting 127 or 129,000 a year with the new pay increases, and some of our independent schools that on their agreement that pay up to that, you're going to get that whether you're living right in Sydney or whether you're living in a small remote town. So yeah, it can definitely keep a lot of money in your own pocket. And when we say that some of our schools do give accommodation, these are going to be in those more rural areas. So like I said, where we moved, we didn't get accommodation. We had to look and find a rental ourselves. But the schools and communities are really good with that. So the local principals, they know all the real estate agents. They're all connected in this community. So they still help. The principal got straight on when my husband got a teaching job in a regional area, got straight on to a parent who was in real estate. And we had 3 viewings after his offer and went straight down and signed a contract on one of them. So you get a lot of help from the community too to help that move be easy. But if you do go more rural, you may get free and fully furnished accommodation, or you may just get a subsidised accommodation. So they may pay 50% of your rent. And if that's on $200 a week and you're only paying $100 a week, it's a big saving. Other places that don't necessarily have accommodation, they can offer temporary teaching accommodation, or they may have something where they could offer it just temporarily. So whether it be for one school term until you find something more appropriate, or for the first few weeks. I've had a lot of this happen recently where teachers have had to quickly make a move, and the schools have provided temporary accommodation for them. And some of our regions even we work with have local connectors. Now, this is like a government incentive where the local council will facilitate in delivering a welcome experience. And it's for essential workers and for their families move into these areas. Because like I said before, these communities want highly skilled people in their communities. They don't want you to go there for 6 months and decide it's not for you and then leave. They want you to live and stay and work and commit to these communities. So I had some teachers recently that went to a small rural town, and they met with the welcome, the local connector, and did the welcome experience, and they got some free passes to the local gym. They got some vouchers for the local restaurants and the local golf clubs. So it's really nice, and it's a good way to meet local people. Okay, so one thing I would also just like to mention on the incentives, and particularly because I know that this webinar as well has some of our teachers from New Zealand in it. Just to give you an idea, if you do go to some of our rural schools, even some of our schools that aren't paying incentives of up to $50,000, I recently had placed nearly 2 years ago a teacher from New Zealand, and she has been teaching in a beautiful little school. Some people do, I think, misjudge that if it's a small community or rural or remote, that sometimes it could be not a nice place to live or unsafe. Well, this teacher is working in a very small community of about 900 people. There really isn't that much there, but it's only an hour and a half to the next nearest larger regional hub. And she knows everyone in the town. She's got to know the whole community. She absolutely loves it. There's only 28 students in her whole school, and she was meant to do 1 year, and then now she's into finishing off her second, and she's committed to staying again next year. So she's absolutely loving it, but she's also decided to do a marketing video to help us show our teachers how great some of our rural areas are. And a part of that video, she has said that she's managed to pay off all of her student loans in New Zealand with the incentives that she's got from moving to the school. And it wasn't a school with the highest of incentives, but it came with free accommodation and very good pay, and a small geographical allowance. And since then, she's saved a lot of money that eventually, when she does move back to New Zealand, she's going to have a really, really good amount of savings to take back with her, as well as no student debt. So it can be a really good setup and start to a young person's life. And now to go on with jobs. So we've literally put a few jobs in these slides. We have lots and lots of different jobs and different opportunities. So you just seen one there for a primary teacher in rural New South Wales. Then we've got a maths teacher, and I believe they're also looking for science. And that's in a lovely little community in Forbes, which is about a 4 or 5 hour drive from Sydney, but again, not far from a much larger regional hub. We've got a science teacher in Albury, starting January 2026, and some accommodation available as well. So these are just a few to give you a little idea, but we do have many, many other opportunities, and not just for the beginning of 2026. So our schools are going to go back at the end of January, and that is the start of the year, academic year in Australia. And we will have, if you're not quite ready to move over at the beginning of the academic year, and maybe term 2, so April may be better for you, or maybe July, or even later in the year, we're quite happy to connect with people where later in 2026, or perhaps even beginning of 2027 might be, more reasonable for you to be able to make the move. So we're quite happy to speak to people, even if it's not something immediately, but in your future plans. And now I will pass back over to you, Claire. Thanks.
So as you know, we've got a lot of people on the ground in Australia. Before you go, it's our goal to try and connect you with other travelling educators. Obviously, if you're going regional New South Wales, that you might not have too many other travelling educators next to you. But yeah, we try and connect you ideally at one of our pre-departure events in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch. And the Sydney office, they also hold events. I know they went to an NRL game, I think, a couple of months ago. So, if you wanted to have a weekend in the city, you can go along and meet lots of other people there for some good networking. But I think even Mitch and Char, being, on the ground over there as well, even whether you might be connected with them via email, or sometimes it might just be a coffee, just sort of trying to make sure you know who else is in your area, so you're not feeling isolated at all. So where to from here? I can see some people have been asking questions. Normally the first step in the process is having a chat to one of the global team, depending on where you are in the world. I know that sometimes with our South African educators, you'll end up directly connecting with Mitch or Char, but if you're in New Zealand or Asia, then you'll be speaking with me. And then we've obviously, as I said, the global team, we've got them across Canada and the UK as well. So getting to know you, like Mitch said, we want to understand what you're looking for, why are you going, what do you like to do, to make sure that we get the right match for you. We from there connect you to the Australian team, then they get underway, so looking for the right type of role for you, and they'll be communicating with you during this whole process, running opportunities past you and keeping you up to date with how that's going. From there, can't remember what's on this one, you'll get an offer. So that's the exciting part. Obviously, through the interview, like Mitch said, you'll be prepped and all that sort of thing. So the whole way through the process, these guys are incredible. They will run you through it's the nicest way to get a job. Once you've got the job offer, Char and Mitch and the team will go through the contract and the pay and all that sort of thing and make sure that you've got that all understood. The contract will be negotiable on you gaining a registration, so that's also part of what we'll sort of support you with and make sure that you've got all the paperwork ready to go. And then in the classroom, so yeah, we're sort of there for you through the whole process, and then obviously once you're on the ground in the country for you as well. So we've tried to answer some questions as we've gone, but feel free to pop more in the chat, or if you want to put your mic on. I don't know whether you can do that on this one, but yeah, throw some questions up while you've got Mitch and Char here.
I think as well, Claire, if anyone's got some multiple specific questions that they might not feel comfortable asking in the forum and would prefer to do it via email or via a meeting afterwards, you'll be getting an email from us over the next few days or early next week just to follow up and say thanks for attending the webinar. And then for those that are looking at heading over relatively soon, when I say relatively soon, I'll probably be in the next 6 months, we can look to organise a digital meeting, either with Claire first and then subsequently with Char and I, to learn more about your plans and start putting some things in place. For those that are still at the very start of their journey around this, and it might be a longer term plan, 12 months, 24 months, maybe even 3 years down the line, then we can just keep in contact via email as well and address any questions as they come through. But we might give it a couple more minutes for some more questions to come through on the chat. And so and Samantha's asked, sorry, go, Claire.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say about the visas. So normally with those skilled visas, I mean, this is a question as well. And the process, I know some people were starting, one lady got back to me this morning and said she'd put the application in for the expression of interest or something. So I think how far through the visa do they need to be before they're speaking to starting the ball rolling, or do they need to have visa back?
No, I'd say they don't need to have their visa back for this. I'd probably say if you're a Kiwi, then you can chat with Claire at any time. Yeah. For those that are overseas who are looking at visas are their pathway, I reckon if your visa expression of interest has been accepted, if you've been invited to apply for the visa, it probably means you might be, minimum of 3, but probably 6 to 9 months away from getting your visa and then flying over. Okay. Once you're at that nomination stage, that's when we'd love to hear from you, because we know that you're basically 5/6 of the way there. You're just waiting to apply for your visa then and get over here. So if you're at visa nomination stage or further, then that's when we can organise a digital meeting. If you're still at the pre-paperwork stage or haven't had your expression of interest accepted yet, then we might wait until that nomination is accepted before we have a digital meeting. But of course, like we said, if you're a Kiwi, we can meet with you tomorrow if we need to, because you've got your Kiwi passport. You can jump on the plane whenever you want.
Yeah.
So we got a question there. Why take IELTS if your degree was done in English as the medium of instruction? It's not, IELTS aren't necessarily based on the medium of instruction. It's the country in which it was provided. So NESA only gives certain countries relief from needing an IELTS, which is, I think, it's obviously Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK, Ireland, and the US, and maybe even Singapore. There's not many countries that if you qualified in that you're granted relief from an IELTS. And for those that are looking to go down a visa pathway as well, such as a 189 or a 190, you actually need to do an IELTS anyway. So if you're from certain countries, which are basically the same as the NESA ones. So it's not something, even though English might have been the language of instruction, it depends on the actual nominated country itself as opposed to the language of instruction. Yeah. And a similar question there from Sharon. Does someone from New Zealand qualification with a PhD still need to do an IELTS test. It depends on where your education qualification, the one which gives you permission to teach.
Teacher.
Yeah.
And
So
it's your
if that was
initial teacher one, not
exactly.
your postgraduate.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So one last question from Rena. What's the necessary paperwork again? We can sort of discuss whether you mean the teacher level paperwork, Rena, or the visa paperwork. I think we can probably discuss that in the follow-up. But essentially, if you're looking to go through the visa, it's a satisfactory IELTS. You also need your teaching qualification assessed. They call it ANZUK, which is our teacher regulatory body and assessing body. So you'll need to have your English language skills tested and your qualification approved. They're the two main bits of paperwork that we need for the visa, which coincidentally are bits of paperwork that we'd actually need for your teacher accreditation in New South Wales as well. So they'd be the first two steps. So Mercy's asked a question. I sent my teacher certificates for qualification to New South Wales last week. How long does it normally take? Unfortunately, Mercy, it's probably how long's a piece of string. Sometimes it can be really quick. Sometimes it can be really long. NESA don't really give any guidelines or timeframes, unfortunately. It just depends on how busy they are, how complete your paperwork is. For those that are from overseas, that they need to be, I think from memory, they need to be, if they're not in English, they need to be sent with translated copies as well. So there's a few things that can delay that, but I'd only be guessing if I gave you a timeline for NESA, unfortunately. They don't have published timelines or specific guidelines that they work to. It's unfortunately a case of they get to it when they get to it, I'm afraid. I'll give it 15 more seconds. I can see one or two more people typing there, and then we might wrap it up. But again, for those that do have some pressing questions, you're very welcome to email through. I put our email addresses there on the chat, so you're very welcome to email through with any specific questions, bearing in mind too that you'll be getting an email from us directly at some point early next week to follow up from the webinar, so we can always keep in contact there. But yeah, feel free to pop some questions via that email, and we can go from there. But if there's nothing else, oh, sorry, we just had one more come through. Could you please give the name of your contact information of your representative in South Africa? We don't actually have anyone in South Africa. Between basically Char and I, Claire's in New Zealand, but between Char and I, we tend to meet with the vast majority of the South Africans that come across. For those that are going to Victoria, you'd probably likely be meeting with Hannah White, who's our representative in Victoria. We've got teams in WA, in South Australia, and in Queensland as well. So for the South African teachers or South African educators, there's no one over there you'd meet with initially. We, as a team, tend to meet with everyone individually based on which state they're going to. So if you wanted to go to New South Wales, it's 100% chance you'll be meeting with either Char or myself, and we can help you through the process from there. And lucky last from Samantha, how big is the demand for early childhood teachers? It's really significant. It's a challenge to find good early childhood teachers. Very competitive for centres to find staff. Early childhood isn't an area that Char and I, Claire, really look after, but we do have a separate early childhood division from birth to 5 who can support in your process as well. So if that's your area, you can flag that in your reply to our email early next week, and we can put you in touch with the appropriate consultants from there. But if there's nothing else, I'll just anything from your side, Claire or Char, before we wrap up?
I think that's covered everything. And yeah, we can definitely speak via email, and Mitch will send out, like he said, an email to everyone that's joined this webinar next week. And then from there, we'll start to find out with your individual situations where you're up to. And if you're ready soon, we will meet you straight away online and talk about your situation. And if you're a few months away, or you still need to get your IELTS, or you still need to do your skills assessment, then we'll wait until you get those through. But we can definitely offer you the recommendation of Marlene and send through her details, so you can get in touch with a migration agent that might be suitable for you moving forward.
Fantastic. Well,
So thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Char and Claire, for hosting the webinar. Thanks, everyone, for joining in. We'll be sure to keep in touch via email, and I hope everyone else has either a lovely evening or a lovely morning, depending on where you are.
Thanks, everybody.